Sometimes, the people who save lives every single day are the ones judged most harshly for the way they look. But when a courtroom nurse stood her ground against a judge's scolding, her words turned silence into thunderous applause. The small-town courthouse in Greenville buzzed with routine cases that morning: traffic violations, property disputes, and minor hearings. The judge, an older man named Harold Winters, was known for his sternness, his strict rules, and his dislike of anything that disrupted the courtroom's order. That morning, among the group of people waiting nervously for their names to be called, sat a woman who didn't quite fit the scene. Her name was Claire Matthews, a registered nurse at St. Anne's Hospital. Unlike the lawyers in their pressed suits and the defendants in their formal wear, Claire wore light blue scrubs. Her hair was tied back hastily, her ID badge still hanging around her neck. She hadn't planned to be there that morning. She had worked a grueling overnight shift in the emergency room. Exhausted, she had barely made it home when a subpoena reminder landed in her email. She had been called as a witness in a case involving a car accident victim she had treated months earlier. With no time to change, she had driven straight from the hospital to the courthouse, her scrubs still faintly smelling of antiseptic and coffee. The clerk called her name, and Claire stood, clutching her small purse. A murmur spread across the room as she walked toward the witness stand. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat down, trying her best to stay awake. But before the questioning even began, Judge Winters leaned forward, frowning. His voice boomed across the courtroom, sharp and disapproving. "Miss Matthews, is this how you think one should appear in my courtroom? Wearing pajamas?" His words cut through the room, and a few people chuckled under their breath. Claire felt her face burn with embarrassment. She opened her mouth to explain but was quickly cut off. "This is a court of law," the judge continued, his tone dripping with disdain. "Not a place for you to parade around in hospital attire as if you're above common respect." Silence fell. Claire sat frozen, gripping the edge of the witness stand. Her scrubs suddenly felt like a shameful costume rather than the uniform of someone who had spent 12 hours saving lives. She glanced around the courtroom. Some people smirked, others looked away uncomfortably. She felt the sting of judgment, the weight of misunderstanding. But deep down, exhaustion gave way to something else. A spark of defiance. She had spent years serving people who had no one else to turn to. She had been there for families in their worst moments, holding hands, wiping tears, fighting to keep strangers alive. And now, in a place where truth was supposed to matter, she was being belittled for wearing the very uniform that symbolized that work. Claire straightened in her chair, her heart pounding. If this man wanted an explanation, she would give him one, loud and clear. The courtroom remained tense, all eyes on Claire as Judge Winters adjusted his glasses, his expression hard. "Miss Matthews," he said coldly, "this is not a hospital ward. This is my courtroom. Here, you will respect the decorum, the dignity, the tradition. Do you understand me?" His words echoed against the walls, and a few people nodded as if agreeing with him. Claire swallowed. She could feel every muscle in her body tighten. For years, she had been trained to stay calm under pressure, when patients coded, when families screamed, when her own exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But this moment felt different. It wasn't a patient's life on the line, but her dignity. "Your Honor," she began softly, but the judge raised his hand. "Don't interrupt me. If you are going to appear in my courtroom again, you will wear proper clothing. Not." He waved dismissively at her scrubs. The humiliation in his voice stung, but something inside her refused to crumble. She thought about the shift she had just endured, the young boy hit by a car who had clung to her hand as they stitched his forehead, the elderly woman who had stopped breathing in the waiting room, the mother who had whispered, "Thank you," through her tears when her child was stabilized. Those scrubs weren't just fabric. They were a badge of battles fought and lives saved. She inhaled deeply, her fingers trembling slightly, but she forced herself to meet the judge's eyes. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice steadier now, I came here straight from the hospital. I didn't have the luxury of changing. Last night, I worked 12 hours without a break. I didn't wear these scrubs to disrespect your court. I wore them because I didn't want to risk being late for my duty here, after my duty there. A ripple spread through the room. People shifted in their seats, their expressions changing from amusement to something closer to curiosity. But Judge Winters remained unmoved. That is no excuse, he snapped. We all have jobs, Miss Matthews. We all work hard. That doesn't give us permission to ignore basic standards. Next time, you will come prepared. His tone was final, dismissive. Claire felt her pulse race, but instead of shrinking, she sat taller. She had faced worse than this: death, tragedy, despair. If the judge wanted to make an example out of her, then perhaps it was time for her to make an example out of him. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with conviction. For the first time in her life, she realized the uniform she wore wasn't just for the hospital. It was her voice. The air in the courtroom was thick, tense, and expectant. Claire could sense that everyone, from the lawyers to the defendants, was waiting to see what she would do next. Most people in her position would have bowed their head, mumbled an apology, and moved on. But Claire Matthews wasn't most people. She thought of her patients, of the countless times she had to advocate for them when doctors doubted, when families lost hope, when life itself hung by a thread. She had stood firm for others, and now it was time to stand firm for herself. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and unwavering, with all due respect, these scrubs are not a sign of disrespect. They are a sign of service. Last night, while most people slept in their beds, I was holding pressure on a wound to keep a man from bleeding out. I was helping a little girl breathe again when her asthma closed her lungs. I was comforting a dying grandmother so she wouldn't leave this world alone. This uniform is not disrespectful, it is the reason I am able to sit here today. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Claire didn't stop. You see pajamas, Your Honor. But to my patients, these scrubs mean hope. They mean someone is fighting for them. They mean they are not alone in the darkest moment of their lives. And if wearing them here makes me look unfit for your courtroom, then maybe we need to ask ourselves, what is truly dignified? Clothing? Or compassion? Her words hung in the air, heavy and piercing. For the first time, Judge Winters seemed at a loss for words. His stern face softened slightly, though he quickly masked it. The silence stretched, thick and profound. Then, something remarkable happened. A man in the back row, an older gentleman with a cane, began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. The sound of applause grew, filling the courtroom with a thunder that echoed against the walls. Lawyers, defendants, even the bailiff clapped, their eyes fixed on Claire. She sat there, not smiling, not gloating, but steady and proud. The judge tapped his gavel, but even he didn't sound as firm as before. His voice was quieter, almost grudging. Order. Order in the court. But the applause didn't stop right away. It lingered, as if the room itself refused to let her words fade too quickly. Claire felt her chest rise and fall, her heart pounding. She hadn't spoken for applause. She had spoken because she couldn't stay silent. But the clapping told her something powerful: people had heard her. And they agreed. When the door finally slammed shut behind the bikers, the diner exhaled in collective relief, the tension lifting like a storm passing over. But the sight of soldiers still standing guard, their discipline unbroken, kept the atmosphere reverent rather than casual. Colonel James Dawson remained by his father's side, watching him with the same respect that had fueled his entire career. Frank, brushing his cheek where the slap had landed, looked around the room and gave a small, reassuring smile to the people who had watched in helpless fear. Don't let fear make you silent, he told them softly, his words reaching everyone in the room. Silence is how bullies win. Courage doesn't always mean fighting, it means standing for what's right, even if your voice shakes. Sarah, the waitress who had made the desperate call, wiped tears from her cheeks, her gratitude shining brighter than words. The truckers and families in the diner exchanged guilty glances, realizing they had frozen when they should have acted. But Frank didn't scold them. Instead, he gave them hope. Next time you see wrong, don't wait for someone else. Be the one who stands first. His voice was frail, but it carried the weight of generations of soldiers who had defended the country. James straightened, addressing everyone now, his uniform gleaming under the diner lights. My father's right. Strength isn't about fists or fear, it's about honor, discipline, and respect. You don't need an army behind you to live by those values, but when you dishonor a veteran, remember this, there's always an army standing with them. The room filled with quiet applause, hesitant at first but then growing stronger, until it felt like the walls themselves were clapping in rhythm with the truth spoken. Frank sat back down, his coffee long gone cold, but his heart warm with pride. Not for himself, but for his son, for the men who had followed him without hesitation, and for the strangers in that diner who had witnessed something unforgettable. Outside, the convoy prepared to leave, soldiers climbing back into their Humvees, their mission complete. But before he left, James leaned down to his father, speaking words only for him. You've always been my hero, Dad. Today wasn't about saving you, it was about showing the world the man I've looked up to my whole life. Frank's eyes softened, pride glistening in them as he squeezed his son's hand. And you've made me proud every single day, he whispered. As the convoy rolled away, the dust rising behind them, the townsfolk remained in the diner, forever changed by what they had witnessed. A single slap had become a lesson in respect, a reminder that freedom and dignity were paid for in sacrifice, and that no act of dishonor could go unanswered when courage and brotherhood still lived on. And though the biker gang disappeared into the horizon, the echo of that day remained in every heart: respect your veterans, because behind each one stands an army of the past, present, and future, ready to rise when honor is challenged. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of the power of respect and honor. Subscribe to Kindness Vibes for more true-to-life stories that inspire courage, dignity, and compassion. Let's keep the spirit of kindness alive, one story at a time.